The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Berdinsky. On my right, Ralph Tomaselli, the editor of the Record Journal. And on my far right, a special guest in the studio tonight, representing the mighty 103rd Assembly District, Liz Linehan. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's great to
be
here.
We exchanged emails earlier today. And you sent me an email back. I was very concerned about it. You said you were getting slammed. I didn't quite know what that meant. I didn't want to take it too literally, but I was a little worried. Right. And so I was grateful when Liz showed up at the studio. What's going on in Hartford?
I'm still alive.
Yeah, okay. What's going on?
By slammed, I meant incredibly busy.
Tell us.
So I'm the chair of the Children's Committee.
Okay.
And our deadline to pass bills out of the committee was last week. And we passed about 50 bills out of committee. So now it's my job to ensure that they're all perfect and ready to go. On top of that, I've got my 40-plus bills. I'm a mentor to some freshman legislators, and I work on their bills. Plus, there are bills that I co-sponsor and support. So I work on those bills. We have Tobacco 21 that we're really trying to get done. And so when I said I was slammed, I just meant crazy busy.
Of these bills, 90 or more that you're working on, mm-hmm. How many of them, on a percentage basis, are with serious intent, have a chance? Because we know from past experience, a lot of bills get introduced and they're not going anywhere.
Absolutely. And I believe that this year it was a record number of bills over the past decade. And so I will say that my Children's Committee bills should have a chance, all of them, to pass because we flesh them out through committee and we believe that they're very strong. The other bills, my personal bills, I would say somewhere around 60 to 70%. And the other bills that I'm working on, I mean, some of them, I would say I'm very close to 100% on those bills that we are working with a strong bipartisan consensus and with a great number of my colleagues. So
out of the list I got on the Connecticut General Assembly website, yes. It has your bills listed. So I printed it out and I picked 2 or 3 just to see kind of at random because the title seems somewhat interesting. I'm going to throw them at you, bring us up to date, where you started, where you are now, and what sort of chance they may have and what you're trying to accomplish, your original thinking. So here's the first one. An act requiring state agencies to adopt zero-based budgeting.
It's dead.
Oh, okay. What happened?
I'll just give you some background. I campaigned on this issue, and I believe that we need to go to zero-based budgeting. And what that means is any state agency has to start at zero when building their budget to recognize, where they can save money. Is it really working? And bring the cost down so we're trimming the fat. So while that bill didn't go anywhere, there is a companion bill to that about results-based accountability. That is still alive, and we're looking to do that. And what that does is ensure that state agencies, they would have to work backwards from their intended outcomes. And so, we want to get here. Well, then we need to do this, 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 and this. And it's another way to trim the fat. And that's still alive in the Appropriations Committee. So please, I'm hoping.
Ralph.
I
got some thoughts, but I want
to.
So
sure.
No.
Where did the opposition to zero-based budgeting come from?
I don't know. It was one of those non-starters. I think part of and I can't say this is for sure, right? But my thinking is with a new governor coming in, new heads of agencies, maybe people need to get their footing first before we introduce a whole new way of doing things. So, and like I said, I don't have any backup on that. That's just what my belief is. So that means that I'm going to continue to introduce this every single year.
Okay, because I think that gives us a chance to talk about something for those of us not real familiar with the legislative process. See, you said you don't know where the opposition came from, and I think sometimes those of us who aren't up there assume that there's a clear up and down vote on every bill, but that's not what happened. So how does something get killed? Is it an administrative process? Can you?
So the chairs of the committee will receive bills that come in that fall under their committee's purview, and they can decide whether or not to raise that bill in committee. And there's a vote to do that. But if the chairs don't want to bring it forward, it's not going to happen. And a lot of times there is opposition from people not even on the committee. So, the governor could have come in and said, we don't want to do this, don't touch it, we're not ready for it yet. Or, someone else. There could have been opposition really from anywhere in the political sphere.
So just by the title of the bill and the fact you introduced it creates an inference, a light inference that I draw that something's wrong with the current budgeting. And this is a criticism. They should be doing this anyway, or something very close to it.
Right.
There are different names for it. But so what was the need that you saw for this kind of a bill?
Typically, what we see happen often, and now this is not just in state government, it's also federal government and even municipal government, that budgets come in and say, this is what we spent last year, and we believe we need 2% more due to inflation, rising costs, what have you. And that doesn't actually give an audit of what you're doing. It just says, we think we need to do more. We think it's going to cost more, so here is our thought. It's not really looking backwards and saying, this money spent, is it bringing us to our intended outcomes?
There's another one I'm going to pull out of the list. An act concerning the improvement of child development through play.
This was the recess bill.
The recess bill.
So I have been very concerned about our children's ability to play and learn. We know that ADD and ADHD is very much connected to the vestibular system. What the vestibular system is it's the part of the body that is, it grows through swinging. It's like what keeps your balance, right? So you have to swing, roll down hills, and all those things build up your vestibular system. Now, children with ADD and ADHD have underdeveloped vestibular systems. And we also know that kids that don't get a lot of recess have behavior problems. These things are all interconnected, right? And kids need to be kids, and we want them to get out there and play. So we introduced this bill that says it's mandated that children need 50 minutes of recess every day in 2 blocks of time. So whether it be 30 and 20, 25 and 25, has to be 2 separate blocks of time, and it's undirected play, so that they can use their imagination, use their bodies how they see fit. And what we believe, myself along with other introducers of the bill, believe that this would, number 1, cut down on behavior problems, number 2, help children learn, and number 3, look at trying to get kids off of ADD and ADHD drugs.
So this, as I read the summary of the bill, pre-K, kindergarten, and grades 1 through 5.
Correct.
Has information come to your attention that indicates kids do not have enough pure free time?
Oh, tons of it. And I will tell you that we have received such support from parents and teachers. The State Department of Education, I knew there was going to be some pushback on it, even when I was writing the bill, because there's no time to add that to the school day. We have teachers unions who are in school from it's contractually obligated that they're in from a certain time to another time, so we can't even lengthen the school day. So we knew it was going to be a process. The bill did pass out of the Education Committee last week or the week before. The only problem is they changed it from a mandate to a may. In Hartford, there's a big may versus shall argument. A may means it's a mandate, you must do it. A shall means we're giving you, or rather, reverse it. Yeah. A shall means it's a mandate, and a may means we're giving you permission. So, in my opinion, it's probably not worth doing right now unless we can get it back to a shall.
With
it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, Ralph?
Why did it change to May? Where did that come from?
For those reasons that I said, the State Department of Education was concerned about the ability to actually pull it off. We wanted to start that conversation. In Hartford, and I'm sure in legislatures across the country, baby steps are really important. I was actually shocked that it even got a public hearing, to be honest with you.
That's a start.
Which is the first step, right? And to have it pass out of committee, what was really interesting is when in committee, when I was talking about the science, every single legislator that was in that room turned their head to listen to me and listen intently because they didn't really understand the science. And now they do. And I think that we've started a really great conversation on how we can do right by our kids. Okay. And we'll continue that conversation for years to come. So
the next one on my list is school climate bill, and in explaining that, if you define school climate.
So school climate is pretty much everything that happens underneath the school umbrella, right? So it's interpersonal relationships between kids, it's relationships between teachers and students, it's teachers and teachers, administration, and it's really, it's about how conducive is the school environment to the health, happiness, and education of our children. Now, it was extensively covered that we in Cheshire, unfortunately, had a child die by suicide, an 11-year-old girl. This bill is the result of that. We need to change our school climates to ensure that the social emotional learning of our kids is a high priority and that kids know about kindness and how to treat each other and about diversity and all those things.
Well, aren't the school systems trying to achieve this even without the bill?
They are.
And
so what this bill does, it's a very long bill. It's about 15 pages. But what the first thing it does is it gives those evidence-based programs free to our school districts to implement, right? So sometimes school districts want these things, but they don't know where to get them. So we are getting them out to these school districts for free. That's number one. Number two, we are redefining bullying. So bullying under current statute says things like, in order to have a verifiable act of bullying, it needs to be pervasive, persistent, and over time. I don't believe that that is the case anymore these days. That was wonderful when it was written, but now things have changed. And so it can now be one act of aggression towards another student can be bullying. What we want to do, though, is not necessarily go to harsher punishments. We know through data that children who are bullies are kids in crisis themselves. So we're looking to make sure that our school climate is supportive of not just the victims, which is extremely important, but also the kids who are acting out themselves. Because sometimes the kids that need love the most are the ones that are showing it in the worst of ways.
So who's pushing back on this?
No one.
So that will?
It got out of committee on consent, which means that nobody even wanted to talk about it. It was just a straight go-ahead. And we are now working with over 40 different people who are renowned in the state as well as nationally on school climate. And we're putting together some really great ideas and a really wonderful piece of legislation that will be one of the first in this nation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's exciting.
That's an accomplishment.
Thank you.
I want to change the subject to national, state, and local politics, sort of democratic politics. I think we talked about this with you the last time you were on the show. I'm not sure about it. And it might have been in the context of Claire McCaskill, who had a struggle in the state of Missouri. It's a red state. That she was a moderate, but this topic is being chatted about on cable news, the talk shows, and in Democratic circles, and that is, where is the Democratic Party now as compared to where it was, let's say, a year ago? Has it moved left, and that's the new center, and especially in the national stage, Democratic candidates, they're running for president, and they're kind of struggling to get the leftmost traffic lane, and those that are not quite as left, they're more moderate, may have a hard time. And so it now seems that if you're a Democrat, and maybe it's local, state, and national, the programs that you favor, you got to either go big or go home. That's sort of the phrase being, right. How do you view all this?
So I think it's tricky, number one, because you're looking at a national politics through a national politics lens and then a state and local politics. I do believe that the Democratic Party is shifting more left, but I still believe there's room for moderates such as myself. I think that we're a balance, right? The younger set that's coming up, and sadly, I'm not one of the younger anymore, but the younger set that's coming up really does skew very far left. There is a progressive caucus in the state legislature. I am not a member of that. I am a member of the moderate caucus. And there are some ideas that I can get behind from the progressive caucus, not all. And I think that as a moderate, I take a look at each individual idea and look at it on its merits. And I'm always going to ask, how are we going to pay for that? Who is this going to hurt? What are the ripple effects? And I think that moderates such as myself are a grounding. We have a grounding purpose for those progressives who are a little bit more pie in the sky.
Idealistic. Ralph.
Well, I wanted to ask. I mean, there is I think Mike expressed it. There is some concern that that the Progressive Caucus may hurt candidates in general elections, and I wondered what your feeling was on that.
I think it depends on the district. If a seriously progressive candidate came and ran against me in my district, I don't think they'd have any luck. But if there's a moderate who is in a district where the electorate is getting younger and younger and more progressive, then that's going to be an issue. But that's okay too, because if they best represent their community, then that's the way it should be. I'm always going to represent my community, and if my community is no longer moderate, then maybe they just won't want to have me anymore. And that's their choice at the polls.
So I want to run down some topics, and these may be mostly national topics, but almost everything is seen through a national lens.
That's very true.
You just can't get away from that. I call these progressive causes, but you've already established you consider yourself a moderate. I think that's where I'm coming from too. But let's get your view on some of these things. I'm going to read some background material so we're all on the same page. So this is an op-ed. I think it came from the Hartford Courant. And it's entitled "Nothing's Perfect: Hidden Costs of the Green New Deal." I'm just going to read a few sentences here and there. Both U.S. Senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, as well as many Democrats in the Connecticut General Assembly, support the Green New Deal. That's fine. However, any endorsement of this aspirational goal should be based on considerations of the technical, environmental, and economic limitations of renewable energy and technology. I got one more on this, and then Liz, we're going to get it back to you.
Sure.
This is from the Hartford Courant, and March 13, the headline AFL-CIO says that a Green New Deal is not achievable or realistic. AFL-CIO, big labor, says Green New Deal not achievable or realistic. Ouch. Couple sentences. The AFL-CIO, the largest group of U.S. labor unions, offered a critical assessment of the Green New Deal, warning that the ambitious plan to fight climate change might adversely affect U.S. workers. In a letter to Senator Markley of Massachusetts and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, the lawmakers who introduced a resolution last month detailing their bill, the AFL said it could not support their proposal. The Green New Deal resolution, as proposed by Markley and Ocasio-Cortez, calls for the federal government to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions with fair and just transition for all communities, sustainable environment, enormous infrastructure investment, sweeping changes to the government's reach into the economy, and it's entered the national conversation. The Green New Deal has come up here and there in the state legislature, too.
Yes.
Your thoughts on what I just went over?
Okay. First, because many people get their news from social media, I'd like to clarify some things.
Good.
First, the Green New Deal is not a bill. It is not a law. It was a resolution. And in Congress, a resolution is a feel-good statement. And that's basically all it is. And it says that these are the things that we want to get to, right? So they're lofty goals. Are they achievable? I don't quite know. Should we at least try to get there? Probably. Some of the things that are stated in the Green New Deal, like saying we're not going to use planes and all, and the methane gas. Oh, if I have to hear one more time about the methane gas. we have to realize that the environment is something we need to focus on. And these are all ideas on what we can do. It does not mean every single one of those is going to turn into law. Now, here in Connecticut, we put forth a Green New Deal idea. And I'm going to be honest, when we were asked if we wanted to sign on to a Green New Deal for Connecticut, this was something we talked about even at the end of last session, which meant we were going to undo some of the problems that was done in the energy bill of last year. And we're going to look at really putting money into green jobs and growing that sector. As a moderate, I'm absolutely 100% for that. And I put my name on the Green New Deal in Connecticut for that purpose. However, I still haven't seen any language. I don't know what's going to come out of that. And if I don't see any language in that that really is about job creation as well as protecting our environment, then I'm going to take my name off of that.
So are the right wingers, the Trump is going to use this Green New Deal as a battering ram against Democrats? Or is that all overblown?
If they do, then they do. And my question to them would be, are you really not looking to create green jobs? Are you really not looking to, save energy on energy costs? Do you not want someone to have virtual net metering here in Connecticut? Because if that's the case, then we've got a bigger problem than the fact that someone might think that I'm a progressive. We've got a problem in that elected officials don't think those things are important, and they are important to every single person who is paying their electricity bill and looking for a job.
Paid family leave. Two things I want to read from. One's an op-ed, and it's got to be from, this is the Washington Post, I believe. Paid family leave isn't just a woman's issue, and it talks generally about it's a family issue.
It's a family issue, 100%.
It goes across the board. Reading from this op-ed, is this Washington Post? No, I'm sorry, for the Hartford Courant, February 18. You may have heard the talking point that the United States is the only industrialized nation that doesn't mandate paid maternity leave. That actually understates the case. As of 2015, the United States was one of only a handful of countries in the world that didn't mandate paid maternity leave at the federal level, according to a report from the International Labor Organizations. And there's another story in the Hartford Courant how the business community is fighting the family leave plan. There's many iterations of it, so right. How you define it is important. And so here's a quote from one of them. I thought this was kind of funny, but I know it's deadly serious.
Yeah.
How is a small business supposed to stay in business when it is possible for nearly its entire workforce to be out on leave for up to 3 months at a time? The NFIB said in testimony to the legislature's Labor and Public Employees Committee. Nearly its entire workforce could be out at the same time. Well, it's a point, Liz, I would like you to address, and also the prospects for some sort of a family leave bill on the state level. But I refer this guy to what's going around the world. Somehow, around the world, they're
doing okay.
They make it, yeah. They make it. But he maybe doesn't know. Anyway, go ahead.
I wouldn't say that he had an argument. I would say he put forth a doomsday scenario.
Yeah.
Look, it's not going to happen. I am 100% supportive of paid family leave in the concept. I'm hoping that we can find a good way to pay for it and make sure that we're not getting ourselves into trouble where we can't fund it down the line. So there's still some things that need to be worked out. However, the U.S. really is the only industrialized nation that doesn't do this. And we have seen time and again that when you provide better benefits for employees, you have increased loyalty, increased production. This is going to be good for everyone. I think we're in a time period when people are just afraid of change.
So, Ralph, we've talked about this in similar similar progressive causes, and there is a bit of a scare factor in here. And you say, well, how's it going to be paid for? And my suggestion to those advocating for this is to answer the question first about how it's going to be paid for, and then get to the benefits maybe second, because some people are automatically scared by this. But the question that should be answered, or the statement should be, here's how this can be paid for, and these are the people who are going to pay for it, and these are the spreadsheets that document what I'm about to tell you, which is a great thing. Now, will it cost a few extra bucks? Yeah, and so you got to cast your vote as to how you want to handle that.
Can I throw something out as you go
Now
on?
is the perfect time.
If you make $100,000 a year,
Yeah,
you're paying about, I think it was $30 a paycheck
yeah.
in order to
The
have
employee is.
the employee.
Yeah.
In order to be, and that's if you make $100,000 a year. Our median income is 60 something. So, it's really an insurance policy. And we have such an aging population. I took care of my mother before she passed, and I needed to take time off from work for that. She had a massive stroke, and I wanted to be there for her. These are the things we're talking about. What if you have a spouse with cancer? What if you have cancer? It's not just about maternity leave, and it's not just about you. So I think when we talk about how we're going to pay for it, it is a small amount. It's 0.5% out of your paycheck. But my concern is, how do we get the startup money, right? Yeah. Because we have to look at how long do we have to do it? How long do people have to pay in before they can withdraw? Now, keep in mind, someone doesn't wake up on a Wednesday morning and say, I feel like I'm going out on paid family leave, and then they're gone by Friday. That's not how it works. You have to apply. You have to be approved. There has to be a legitimate reason. It's not extended vacation. There is a real reason. And, the federal government does the Family Medical Leave Act, and that allows you to take time off without fear of losing your job. Unpaid. This now means, now remember also with that, I believe you have to use your vacation time, your other PTO time before FMLA even kicks in. These are all things we could look at for this bill as well. But it's about families, and it's about taking care of our loved ones. And it's absolutely something I think we should do.
Well,
what do you think realistically might come out of this legislation, or if anything, in regards to family leave?
So this is the second year that it was brought up. I haven't written the bill. I'm not a co-sponsor, even though I believe in the concept. So I haven't been involved in the day-to-day process. But I believe what came out of committee was the 0.5%. I think that now that we have a more progressive legislature, that we may have the votes to do that. I do know that there is some talk that we do have some Republican votes on it as well. And so right now, I think the prospect is way better than it was last year. However, I'm not a betting woman until I see the vote count. And we're not there yet. But I know that there's a lot of interest in our legislature.
So to win over moderate Democrats and Republicans, again, the question needs more empirical backup. Absolutely. And Liz, you mentioned, okay, where's the startup money coming from? That needs to be addressed too. Yes. So, and then the fear that this businessman raised, well, isn't it going to be so that everyone's going to be out at the same time? My answer to him was, well, then you're probably putting something in your water. If that's right. Can I say that on the show?
You can.
I think you can. Yeah. I think it's a good point.
But that should be addressed head on. Right. And maybe it didn't happen this year, but it happens next year. Okay, public option for medical insurance. That seems to be gaining some traction. What's going on there?
I love that idea. It's
What's going on?
So expensive. I would love to see it happen.
Let's describe first what that is, or the iteration that you like of the public option.
So the iteration that I like is the ability to have people buy into the state medical system.
Okay.
And I'd love to see that happen. I don't know where we are with that. I think it's probably going to take quite some time to do that. It's going to cost the state a ton of money. I don't have the numbers, but it's a lot. But I think
and is that because the premiums are going to be underwritten and some subsidized?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure the ins and outs of what the plan in insurance was.
Okay.
I know that I'm happy to begin that conversation. But when I spoke earlier and I said that there are some baby steps, I think this is the first in quite a few baby steps of this. We need to start the conversation and see how best we can make it happen. And I'd like to see it ultimately done.
So one of the problems, obviously, is if the state is in tough shape, and you're talking about increasing sales tax revenues, and all kinds of other, tolls and everything else, all of which we're going to get to in a second. How the heck can you afford another program which has a potential to be expensive, like underwriting insurance premiums for people that aren't otherwise covered on an employer plan.
Right.
I mean, isn't that the nub of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe, the more we have the conversation,
Sure.
the more ideas come out, and the more we can work it out. Nothing, I will tell you right now, 99.9% of the bills in the legislature do not get voted on looking exactly the same as they were raised.
Yeah.
So everything is a work in progress. And I think the conversation is started, and we will see quite a few ideas, and hopefully something will come to fruition and is workable.
Yeah. Early voting. I guess Connecticut's constitution doesn't permit early voting. Right. Most other states have it. Where do you stand on it?
I think we need to go to early voting, and we need to do it soon.
Well, what's the hang up? Are the Republicans against it because they're afraid it'll increase Democratic turnout and
I think so, but that's not what they're saying.
What are they?
I've heard the argument that it's gonna create voter fraud. It's just not.
Well, that's what Len Fasano said or suggested, but I don't.
Oh, bless his
Does
heart.
anyone take that seriously?
No.
Connecticut. This is my clip from the Connecticut Mirror. It goes back February 26. Connecticut is one of the 12 states without early voting at the polls, and only one of 3 whose state constitutions currently bar it.
Let me give you for example.
Yeah.
Let's say Johnny Wallingford has a job, right? And his job it's not a typical 9-to-5 job.
Sure.
And he's looking to feed his family because, like many people who live in Wallingford, he's paycheck to paycheck. And he suddenly gets overtime. And he's psyched for that overtime. So he's going to wind up working that day 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Well, what happens if he's working 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. to get overtime to feed his family on election day? He's not going to be able to vote. So basically, by not allowing early voting, you are not allowing hardworking people living paycheck to paycheck who can't necessarily take time off their jobs to vote. You're not allowing them to have a voice. And I just fundamentally disagree with that.
Well, I just wanted to define early voting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me exactly what early voting means.
Here's
I
early.
Apologize.
Well, I called up in preparing for this show. I called up my sister, who's somewhat involved in North Carolina politics, because they have early voting.
Right.
And so I said, Molly, so what's going on down in North Carolina? She says, this is what we do. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, down in North Carolina and most of the country, it's a county organization, not a town by town situation. And she went on the State Board of Elections website. I think it was October 17 was the date that early voting started. And I think different counties can have different hours, and I mean, those are details, right?
Right.
But the idea was starting on October, I believe, 17 and ending November 3, there was early voting. Now, where would you go? Well, in Moore County, there were just 2 places. Okay. Every precinct didn't have a polling place, so it was somewhat limited as to where you would go. But you had enough days
Which, by the way, is voter suppression. But go on.
Well, no, this is for early voting.
I know, but but still,
right.
It is voter suppression. Okay.
But that's how North Carolina famous for
how
voter
they operate.
suppression. But early voting was in 2 places in Moore County. Other counties, Moore County I think is more rural, but those counties that have Charlotte and Raleigh, they may have more. I don't know. But that's how they do it, and then you blend in, absentee ballot reform. So I think any plan that gives voters a couple of shots, certainly one on a Saturday, to me, certainly one after hours, and then whether it's 5 days, 10 days, or 15 days, it's much better than what we have now. And now you have the local officials' argument cost. Because the way Connecticut does things, all of that falls on the local municipality. North Carolina, it's socialized through the county. It's spread out through the county who funds it. Right. So you'd have to work out some way that the state reimburses the towns for additional costs, or you're going to get pushback from the town clerk, the registrar, the mayor, all those, tax hawks. I don't want to pay $1 extra because someone can't get out to the polls on an election day. I just want to finish. You think about it. I just want to read another sentence or two. All right. In 2018, nearly 40 million Americans in 38 states and the District of Columbia went to the polls before Election Day. 40 million. amending the Constitution is a real problem. It's not going to happen right away. There was a study done by Caltech and MIT in 2015. I'm a little skeptical about it, but it illustrates a point. I think the order of magnitude is useful. This study found that long lines deterred at least 730,000 people from voting in the U.S. in 2012. So that's some of the background. Liz, final thoughts, and then Ralph's final thoughts on that.
Everybody deserves a voice.
Well, one way it might work in Connecticut, because we don't rely on counties and we have all these little municipalities, is you simply go to town hall and vote. And maybe you have a week before election day. I mean, you have clerks in town hall. It's their job.
I don't think it's overly complicated.
Right, no, it's not that complicated.
I'm just forecasting what the screams are going to be. You know, people in some of these offices have to work harder. They got to get more volunteers and checkers, and, you know, it's going to be an extra burden. Yes, it is. That's
But I don't think it's going to be what they think it's going to be.
Yeah, it's like an excuse.
Yeah.
Well, one of the big subjects in Wallingford was legalized pot. Wasn't there this giant rally?
Oh,
it wasn't
God,
giant. It wasn't a giant rally, but it was some sort of event. 50 people. I think the Record Journal said. I wasn't there, but I mean.
I think it was 50.
Let me just finish the thought.
Finish,
I think it was on a. Was it on a Saturday? It
was on a Saturday.
And it was town hall steps.
Right.
And there were speeches and proclamations against legalizing pot. Let me just get my editorial view out. On this. I think on prior shows I said I'm kind of mildly against legalizing, but I'm not all twisted in a knot about it. And that's because I think it's because when I went to college, my drug of choice was beer. Mm-hmm. And I'm just too conservative, I think, you know, and it just, but I know my logic is flawed on that. But in any event, Liz, your thoughts on recreational marijuana?
Get it done.
Get it done. What does that mean? What does that mean?
You know, the time for the prohibition, it's time for it to end. You know, I have some concerns, and these concerns are starting to be answered, right? So the concern is, how will you know if someone is impaired while driving? Well, there is a new device that is a breathalyzer type device for marijuana. It's being tested in Massachusetts already. So
I hope that doesn't come to Connecticut. I mean,
go ahead. Stop. It should. Additionally, you know, we know that marijuana is helping people get off of opioids. We are in the midst of a giant opioid crisis. There was a study done, I believe, at Hartford Hospital regarding rib fractures. And they took patients who had rib fractures, and instead of giving them opioid medication, they gave them marijuana or cannabis oil or some iteration of that. And they found that it helped their pain. It gave them pain management the same or as better as opioids. We know that people self-medicate, and so let's help them do that in a way that is regulated. You know, the industry will be highly regulated, and the product that comes out of it will be highly regulated. And we want to make sure that you know, we're able to keep track of that and tax it, and that some of that money can go to fight opioid abuse and so on and so forth. So I just think it's time.
So Ralph, I wanted to remind you, because I knew this was in the back of your mind.
What's that?
That legalizing recreational marijuana just doesn't mean joints that you smoke and inhale. It comes in all kinds of things. Right. You know, little pills or fudge or candies or all manner. You know, tinctures. Now, how do I know all this?
How do you know all this?
Well, I took a trip this past winter out to see my sister in Washington State. Right. And took the ferry over to Whidbey Island. And it's a real cultural shock to see along the road these marijuana shops. So anyway, your thoughts on this whole tincture? You prefer a tincture?
No, I think that
something you could swallow. I mean,
there are many ways.
You're not an inhaler.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not an inhaler.
All right, thumb and index.
Candy would be probably good.
So actually, no, we got to talk about that. Finish your thought, and we'll talk about that.
I think that there are many ways to come.
You're getting it down. Look at this.
Right,
I know.
Look at this.
I don't know if you. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The way I've begun to come at this marijuana legalization. Is through this prism, which is our ability to rationally and fairly enforce drug laws. We just can't do it. And we've got people in urban areas who have, maybe an ounce of marijuana, maybe a little more, who end up, charged, a slew of charges against them, high bail, they sit in jail for months, and you have people in the suburbs with just as much marijuana who never are hassled, they sit in their... So we just can't fairly enforce drug laws in any way, shape, or form, and it costs us a fortune to unfairly enforce drugs. So that's where I'm coming from on this.
So, Liz, if the only bill that has a chance sets the age limit at 21 to legalize marijuana with all the controls and everything else, are you a yes vote on that?
So I will still advocate as my original position that I would like to see it at age 25.
But
if the only way it's going to get on the floor is age 21, I would still support it. But I have yet another amendment to that.
Shoot.
I would like to see, because you did bring up edibles.
Yeah.
I don't think that edibles should be sold in the state of Connecticut if they look like something a child would eat. So no edible gummy bears, no edible, you said edible
Good
candies.
point.
No, nothing that could be confusing to a child.
yeah, it has to look like asparagus or something. Right? I mean,
That would be perfect. I like that.
Let's talk about vaccines, because that's in the news nationally. I guess the headline story is in some parts of the country, and maybe in Connecticut, more and more kids are not getting vaccinated because they find exemptions from the requirement. There was, I think, a story on CBS News last night about some athlete who didn't get vaccinated for chickenpox. Was kicked off his team, not kicked off his team, but he wasn't allowed to play. And
Because there was an outbreak.
Because there was an outbreak.
There was an outbreak. That's something important
yeah.
to say. It's not because he wasn't vaccinated. It's because he wasn't vaccinated and
there was an outbreak. So what is happening at the legislature, if anything, with respect to vaccines in Connecticut?
So, I think you know the answer to
I'm not
that.
sure. I'm not sure.
Just last week, I joined my majority leader and Representative Josh Elliott to put a call out for the end to the religious exemptions for vaccinations for public school children. I have felt very strongly about this. I have done pro-vaccine legislation for 3 years now, and we are consistently bombarded with just a very few people who are against it, but are outrageously vocal. And so we haven't been able to get anything passed. The first one that we tried to do in 2017 was if you were, because we first of all, we got rid of the philosophical exemption in 2015. So then those people all went to the religious exemption. So now we see rising numbers in the religious exemption. And so what we wanted to do was, if you were claiming the religious exemption, you have to watch a video from the CDC on the safety and efficacy of vaccines before you can get that form. I couldn't even get that passed. Then I had the school nurses, because right now a school nurse can sign the form. But school nurses have come to me and said, we don't want to do that. We were thrown on the last minute to make people happy. And it goes against what we believe in, and we don't want to put our name on it. So we put in a bill to take them off of the form. Again, the outcry from, there are only 1,200 currently in the state of Connecticut utilizing this exemption. Those 1,200 made a roar that sounded like 50,000, and we couldn't get that passed either. What I did do is change it to amend the form to say that anyone has the right to refuse this form under law. That is current law. So we just wanted to reiterate that on the form. That did pass out of committee. And hopefully we can pass that out of the legislature this year. But in addition to that, we would like to, my majority leader, Representative Ritter, has said he would like to call for a vote on getting rid of the religious exemption by the end of next session. So that is 12 to 14 months from now.
Does that have a shot?
I hope so.
Ralph?
I have to admit, like, I was, when this issue recently came up in Southington, where there was an outbreak of the mumps, and as part of the school's response to it, not only the children that were suffering from mumps had to stay home, but that anybody who wasn't vaccinated also had to stay home. And I was just astounded that you can attend public school without vaccination, because as I put my own children through school, I had no idea it was optional, never mind the vaccine. But anybody whose child plays sports knows that they're real strict about getting a physical before you. I mean, you could be the best player on the basketball team, and you aren't stepping on that court if you don't have a physical. So I don't know what my point. I'm astounded that they're even allowed to attend public schools.
Well, and so many people say that, by the way. There have been some people who are against vaccinations who have tried to come out against me personally. And I could talk about that for hours, but they would post online in the Wallingford Community Forum, the Southington Talks, and the Cheshire Community Forum on Facebook, and say, this is what your representative is trying to do, thinking that they were going to rile up anger. 500 comments between, and they were all positive, believing in this. This is what the community wants, and so I'm hoping to give it to them.
We're going to continue with this topic for weeks and weeks and follow this, because this is, I don't know, I really don't have as much patience as I should, perhaps, for those that insist on not getting their kids vaccinated. But we're going to have Vince Candelora on in a couple of weeks and see if there's another view. Let's change the subject if we can. The budget. We've avoided that, but we got 10 minutes or so. Okay. So let's talk about the budget. So here we have Governor Lamont, a Democrat, who comes out with a new budget, increasing sales tax revenues. So even though the sales tax rate is not going up, every consumer in Connecticut is going to be paying more sales tax. He adamantly refuses to increase the income tax on very, 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 very high earners. Which and increasing the income tax on that group is one mitigation, for solving the deficit. I guess his budget doesn't do a lot, Liz, in cutting costs, but no one, I guess, has had a real persuasive way of doing that. He's said that there's going to be a debt diet, which I guess means that bonding isn't going to sail through as quick and easy as it had in the past, and other characteristics. But your big 10,000 feet above the earth view of his budget.
As it's written now, I don't support it. Let's get that out of the way.
Let's get that out of the way. Why
but let's
not?
take it apart, right?
Okay.
So I understand why the governor was looking at expanding the sales tax to these different pieces of our economy. Let me point something out. A lot of those carve-outs from the sales tax were done many, many, many years ago because of lobbyist control. So if the lobbyist for the trial lawyers said, we don't want to be charged sales tax, it was like, oh, okay, well, we'll then take them out. So that has changed over the years, and they don't have the control that they once had, mainly because of the Citizens Election Fund, which I am a huge supporter of, but we can get that into another time. So I get the way he's doing that. However, I don't think that now is the time to do that when so many people in the state of Connecticut are struggling. And some of those things that they want to tax actually could be roadblocks to getting the services that people need. For instance, lawyers.
Well, would sales tax is what, 6.3, 4, whatever. Let's say 6.5.
6.5.
Yeah. Is 6% really going to stop someone from fixing their kitchen when the pipe breaks?
That I don't. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
My concern is anyone who's looking for legal advice. That is a concern of mine. Is if they're going to pump more money into legal aid. If the state's going to do that, then maybe I'd be okay with that. But ultimately, I think that we just can't talk about raising taxes if we're not willing to talk about finding waste and eliminating waste in our budget. Well, there has to be a balance.
Yeah, but wait. We got to back up. Of course, there has to be balance on all those platitudes, but you need to find a ton of revenue. And you're not going to cut your way into that. You're not going to cut enough department budgets in order to solve the problem.
That's why I said there needs to be balance.
So, we've had guest after guest come on the show and say, no, I don't want to increase taxes. But there hasn't been a good, tight, credible idea as to how to balance the budget without additional revenues. And we've heard the Republicans time and time again, waste and fraud, waste and fraud, waste and fraud. But they haven't been able to specify and, introduce the legislation.
Not one single thing, by the way. And you're right about that.
So I'm confused about your response.
Okay. So when I said there needs to be a balance, there are different ways that we can look at saving money. The first would be, like I said earlier, the zero-based budgeting and the results-based accountability. That trims the fat. It's probably not going to get us to where we need to be, but
probably
it's
not.
part of it.
Yeah.
I want to legalize marijuana, legalize sports betting. That's not going to get us to where we want either.
Okay.
But I haven't heard any other real ideas except for I have put forth an idea to award state contracts based on their net value, which basically means that Connecticut will only give state contracts to businesses who employ Connecticut workers. That will bring in more income tax revenue. And I shouldn't say only, it actually weights them on the net value. That's a really complicated bill that we can get into another time, but it's another way to look at bringing in more revenue without hurting someone or putting people to work, right? And additionally, we do need to look at maybe expanding revenue in other places, but how can you have that conversation if you are unwilling to look at reducing costs on the other side? So I think the governor's budget is one aspect of what we can do. I think that we can take bits and pieces that might work, but it's going to be up to the legislature to bring up ideas that actually make sense.
Ralph?
Well, maybe I'm going to take us in a different direction, but
Please.
No, it never, the more I learn about politics, the less I realize I know. And
Me too.
And
Just kidding.
And just a word on how schizophrenic we are as voters. This governor and this legislature was virtually had to promise not to raise taxes before they were elected, virtually during the election. Yet, at the municipal level, for example, let's just say Wallingford, we have voted now for almost 40 years for a mayor who raises taxes every year, like other mayors do. I mean, he raises taxes, he doesn't zero-base budget, he doesn't really go after waste or fraud, but he's built a political dynasty. But yet, when we look to the governor and the state legislature, we judge them so differently. And I don't have an answer for that, but it just confuses me.
Well, state of Connecticut has this huge deficit that has to be that's accumulated over the years
70
through the
years.
irresponsibility of legislatures and governors through time. So, Liz, there's been proposals by progressives to raise the income tax on the super rich. I'm going to define that in a minute. Mm-hmm. Well, that would help, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So, and Cheshire has a lot of wealthy people.
Cheshire does not have super wealthy people.
What?
Cheshire does not have the super wealthy.
Doesn't have. Okay.
Doesn't have the super wealthy. I think that there is a misconception when we talk about raising taxes on the super wealthy.
Okay.
That if you are, high middle income, you might think that would apply to you. I am all for raising taxes on people who clear over $1 million a year. We hear consistently the argument that they will leave. I seem to remember, wasn't it the 5 richest people in Connecticut wrote an op-ed in the Hartford Courant saying, tax us, we won't leave.
Yeah. So I wanted to find, according to this Hartford Courant article that came out on March 15, who those people are and how much additional taxes they would pay if this idea of taxing the super wealthy passed. Just exactly what does it mean and where do your sympathies lie? This is according to the Hartford Courant. One of the chief solutions, the caucus, this is a progressive caucus, recommended involves setting a new top rate on the state income tax and also setting a special rate on capital gains. Caucus members said specific rate proposals are still being developed, but they want to add approximately, ready for this? 0.5%. That's all.
Right.
0.5%. And if you're married, that 0.5% begins to kick in after the first $1 million. So everything below that is the old income tax rate, which is intolerable. But above $1 million per year, I guess that's adjusted gross income, I guess, taxable income, 0.5%. Now, if you're making $1 million a year as a family, your net worth got to be 50 million just to start.
Right.
So for those right wingers, the Republicans that shriek, you're over taxation, it's not fair. Forget the adjectives and the hyperbole. 0.5% more for the million and first dollar. So you get to keep the first million at the old rate.
Right.
Can't afford that? Seriously? It's not necessarily a progressive, thing. I mean, this is 0.5%. It's not, progressive or liberal. It's 0.5% over $1 million. That's all it is. Call it
And it
whatever you
still
want.
keeps us below surrounding states, New York and New Jersey, where, we can make sure that no one's going to leave Greenwich to go to New York and still pay more taxes because we gave them an extra 0.5% on top of $1 million.
So are you in favor of the additional 0.5% over $1
Yes.
million? Well, what's going to happen? You're not in favor of this budget as currently presented. It doesn't sound like the Democratic leadership or the Republican leadership have any ideas to materially cut. It doesn't sound that way.
We don't know yet. They're still working behind closed doors, and hopefully they'll present something
Well, one
soon.
way is that towns like Wallingford are going to get short-sheeted a little bit, and in 2020, $1 million less, and and the following year, almost double, about $1.8 million under the current plan.
Yes.
So, that's
And then don't
gonna-
forget the 25% of teachers' pensions.
and the teachers' pension,
Including the extra points on top of that.
So that's the
for
cutting.
every point that you pay, that your median salary for teachers is above the state median.
so that's the cutting.
We
I
can't do that.
Can't do that,
We can't do that.
Ralph. Why not? Why can't we?
Well, something has to. You see, the problem here is everywhere you turn, everybody says you can't do it. So something has to give here.
Yeah. This is from the Record Journal article about the impact on municipalities,
Right.
at least on Wallingford. It's just one paragraph. In Wallingford, overall state aid is reduced from 24.4 to 23.4 million, with the town's contribution to the teachers' pensions at roughly $400,000 in fiscal year 2020. And the town's contribution, which has been zero up to now, right? The state has funded all of the teachers' pension plan, but in 2021, the town is expected to kick in $800,000. So the impact on the governor's budget on local taxpayers is going to be felt, and pretty soon it's going to be $250,000 and creeping up to $500,000. I don't know. I don't.
So this is where negotiations should begin
With whom?
with the governor.
Okay.
And as a member of the moderate caucus, we've been kicking around our own ideas. I understand why he wants to have municipalities pay part of it. However, we need to look at saying, okay, if that's the case, you want us to pay that, then you need to agree to hold our funding flat for the next 5 years. Maybe we'll consider it. But you can't take away from education, take away from municipal aid, and make us kick in 25%. That's not going to work.
Let's make that the final
Okay.
word. We have run out of time. Liz Linehan, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it, and we're so happy to hear you having such a great time in Hartford.
I am.
And thank you, viewers, for listening to the Citizen Mike Show. You can watch Citizen Mike Show on WPAA on Fridays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 9, or eventually it pops up on YouTube. Go to YouTube and plug in the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel. All the prompts will come up, and we can send you an email directly to the link to that YouTube show. Thanks again to Liz Linehan from the mighty 103rd, and thank you for viewing. Good night, everybody.